Now let's stick with the doctor example for a moment, because people don't feel the same way towards all doctors. The way that someone feels towards a doctor will, like anything, still be affected to some extent by the first impressions and the experiences leading up to that first impression too, because those feelings, as we've just learned, transfer from the first impression onto the additional impressions as well. So let's look at and break down the steps leading up to that first impression with the doctor. The patient goes through the front door of the medical clinic, they go up to the front desk, maybe swipe their Medicare card, they go and take a seat and then wait patiently until they're called to go into the surgery. But even in that time while you're sitting in the waiting room, what kind of things are around you in your peripheral vision that are sort of surrounding your environment? Well, have you ever noticed that the walls of a doctor's waiting room are almost always plastered with health information and promotion posters, educating the patients about anything from hepatitis B vaccinations, flu vaccinations, how to check for breast lumps, how to eat a healthy diet, how to wash your hands to stop the spread of disease, how to prevent bone decay, etc., etc. Now, you're probably not going to sit there reading every little word on every poster. You may skim through some of the ones that are most relevant to you, but chances are you're probably just going to have a very momentarily glimpse at them in your peripheral vision. But whether you read them in detail or not, there's a powerful effect by simply having them there that goes beyond just educating the patients. Simply having them there helps to create a certain atmosphere, a certain feeling of medical related knowledge, credibility, expertise, like you're in an environment of someone who really knows their stuff. Now, it's not really an overtly obvious conscious thing. It's not like people are going to be sitting there thinking to themselves, wow, with all these medical posters on the walls, this doctor must really know their stuff. Instead, it just creates the background kind of effect of trusted authority. So now, with the aim to replicate similar communication strategies so that the user can transfer those sort of feelings onto their experience using your website, one simple and effective strategy is to create similar kind of educational content and decorate your website in a way similar to the way that a doctor would decorate their waiting room. Now, as I'll explain in more detail in a moment, even if you only create such content for the purpose of sort of decorating the user's peripheral vision as they navigate through your website, that can help to create a solid effect of credibility, of expertise, of sharing your knowledge and expertise in a way that positions you as that trusted authority figure. So let's say you create some informative content in the form of some articles, infographics, diagrams, or especially videos, and you put it in the user's peripheral vision on the website. Now, are they going to sit there and look through every piece of content? No, probably not. But similar to the doctor's waiting room effect, even just having it there in the user's peripheral vision still helps to create the right atmosphere. Now, strategically placing information content on the website in the user's peripheral vision can actually be more effective than placing it in the direct vision. This is the reason why. I come across a lot of websites where they're obviously trying to utilize this effect by putting, information content all over the site, articles, blog posts, videos, etc. But the problem becomes when it's so scattered all over the website, it actually becomes confusing and difficult to navigate. So the user might get the impression of credibility because there's information all over the place, but at the same time they're getting lost, they don't know where to click to go next. So the trick is to make sure that the homepage, the contact page, and the 3, 4, maybe 5 categories of uncertainties are still really clearly and easily labeled somewhere at the top, so it becomes very obvious to the user how to navigate the site. Your priming information content, on the other hand, should be somewhere just sort of decorated throughout the user's peripheral vision, so it's not going to get in the way or get them lost or confused. Now, when I'm referring to the user's direct line of sight versus their periphery, I'm not just referring to this in a visual context either, I mean psychologically. See, what a lot of marketing people will tell you is to keep your online message very clear and simple, and that's fine, but what they're referring to are the messages in the customer's direct line of conscious awareness. What a lot of people overlook, however, is the power of subliminal influence. You see, our conscious awareness can only really focus on one thing at a time. Now, even when people say that they're multitasking, what they're really doing is allocating their conscious awareness towards one task whilst they still may be engaged in another task, but at a sort of unconscious autopilot sort of level. The classic example I think most people can associate with is driving. Have you ever driven somewhere and you get to your destination and you stop and think back and go, geez, I don't even really remember the trip here? what's happening is your conscious mind and unconscious mind sometimes take it in turns of what you're aware of. So, for example, you might have something on the radio that grabs your attention and your conscious mind is concentrating on what they're saying on the radio. Meanwhile, your unconscious mind kind of takes over the driving, does it on autopilot. But then you might get to a difficult intersection. You really have to concentrate on which direction you're going to turn and when you're going to stop and when you're going to go. And so what happens there is your conscious mind takes over the driving, while your unconscious mind is still kind of taking in the advertising messages on the radio at a sort of subliminal level. So hopefully now that makes more sense when it comes to understanding what I'm referring to when I differentiate conscious awareness from unconscious awareness, or things that we are directly focused on by comparison with the things that are sort of still affecting us but in our peripheral awareness. So similar to that example I gave about the experience of going through a drive-through, where irrespective of what the customer's conscious mind is aware of, our unconscious mind takes in all the little things around us that stimulate our peripheral awareness. And it's often those things that stimulate that peripheral awareness that determine the feeling that the customer takes away from the experience, irrespective of what they consciously remember about it. Now, if you'd like me to be a little bit more clear about how we can apply these formulas on a website, let me give you this example. This is my coaching company, Top of the Class Professional Tuition. Now, we have hundreds of tutors scattered all over Australia that we personally train to help students of all ages with their schoolwork and their studies. Now, once we set up this website, what we did was install some software that enabled us to sit there behind the scenes, sort of monitoring and tracking users' behaviour on the site. And so, as expected, people would often go from the landing page to the contact page, but then they'd sit there on the contact page for 3 or 4 minutes, not making a call, not filling out the form, just sort of sitting there. And what they were doing was watching some of the videos that we placed on the contact page to act as strategic priming content. And so from there, what we would see is they'd often then start clicking on some of the links on the contact page and start navigating the site. And often just browse around a little bit, sometimes for a few minutes, sometimes for half an hour, sometimes for more. Because we set up the sites anticipating people would go to the contact page, but then tried to do that whole, ooh, look at that approach, where we'd not disrupt their journey, but distract them with stuff to really engage their interest and attention and get them browsing around the site, kind of like a kid in a candy shop. And so eventually they'd make their way back to the contact page, and then we'd get them on the phone, and we got the same reoccurring sort of pattern of feedback time and time again, which was always very positive, of course, but it was worse to the effect of, oh, I really liked your site, I learned a lot, you've got such great content there, you know, I really got the good feel about you guys, I really like the way that you do things, I like your approach. And of course my response was almost always, you know, trying to narrow them down to become a little bit more specific so I could understand exactly what it was that, you know, enabled them to feel that way. And the response that they gave was almost the same response time and time again, no matter who I spoke to, which was basically, first of all, there was this pause where they'd stop and think about it. Similar to the way that a driver would probably stop and think about the journey on the way there that they don't really remember specifically. And then they'd usually say something like, oh, you know, it was just the approach that you guys have, just the way that you do things. And they kind of struggled to identify or pinpoint one specific thing. But the feedback was always basically, can't remember anything specific, just got the right kind of feel about you guys. So of course, then when we send the tutor out to the home, they're already viewing that tutor with that high level of expectation that they've been primed to expect by the feeling that they got sort of playfully navigating around our website. Overloading the customer's mind with too much information can sometimes be very overwhelming and off-putting, but strategic overload of information, however, can be used effectively if done the right way. Now, when it comes to strategic overload of information, the classic example are infomercials. Producers of infomercials know that most customers are not going to watch the infomercial from the start for 30 minutes all the way through to the end. Some people do, but even if they do, they're probably not paying too much attention for the entire 30 minutes. What they do with infomercials are they show different chunks of information broken up into these different segments throughout the duration of the infomercial. They might have segments where there's some expert giving some advice. They might have segments where there's testimonials. They might have segments where there's diagrams or instructions showing how the product works. So consciously it gives the impression like they're giving you all this different information, but what they're actually doing is making sure that the same feeling is portrayed in every segment of information. So no matter what part of the infomercial you're watching, the same fundamental message, the same emotion is reinforced over and over again throughout the infomercial. So what happens as the viewer is watching, consciously they're aware of all these different segmented chunks of information they're being presented with, but unconsciously they're being hit with the same feeling over and over and over again. And so the longer they keep viewing, the greater that desire to buy the product starts to build up and up and up. And when the customer reaches that point, do they consciously remember one specific piece of information that really tipped them over the edge? Probably not. But what they do often report is it just got to a point where they got the right feeling, and that's when they decide to go ahead and make the sale. So look, the next lesson is the big one, where I'm going to show you exactly what to place in your information content exactly to create the desired feeling of trusted authority. But for now, lesson 8 is, remember, never overlook the subliminal effect of content placed in the user's peripheral vision. In that sense, think of your website as being similar to a doctor's waiting room, where a doctor might have health information posters covering the walls in the waiting room. Similarly, your website can have information content strategically placed in the user's peripheral awareness to create the sense of trusted authority in their unconscious mind.
Next time you're in the process of being a customer, whether it's at the shopping centre or online, start to pay more attention to the surrounding influences that would have ordinarily gone unnoticed. Just have a think about what effect it may be having on shoppers without them being aware of it. Do you notice different ways used to reinforce the same feeling over and over again? What kind of information content can you use to replicate the doctor's waiting room effect on your website? How can you structure your website to place an overload of content in the user's peripheral awareness whilst keeping the site feeling easy to navigate? By the way, have you figured out how that great teacher and doctor communicate differently? In the next lesson, Stuart reveals the secret formulas to communicate with customers in a way that will allow you to create a sense of trusted authority. He'll also show you some simple tricks to apply these formulas on your website when creating information content for your customers. So stay tuned for Lesson 9 if you want to find out how to use this effect to prime your customers for the first contact you're going to have with them.